we've reached a bit of a milestone here, because I've spent ages working on the back section of the engine compartment door, where we've had some quite bad rust, and it's where I've been doing my first welding, and I've been going through quite a steep learning curve. But the last bit that we've done is really this bit along here. So the back section underneath the engine compartment, under the door, and there was some really bad rust all along here where it's been accumulating water underneath the seal. So there's a rubber seal that goes around the door. So this has been really badly rusted through and needed some pretty serious attention. So, been quite a lot of work gone into this and a lot of lessons learned. So started off down here, cut a big section out from here. There was some bad rust here, so sort of folded some metal and put it in here. And I also cut out this section and folded some metal and put it in here. Now that was where I started. So the big hole, this end over here, had really bad rustiness. Had to be cut out. I put in a nice big piece of metal in here, and that was quite exciting because that was my first more complex weld after my first simple weld in the last video, and quite a lot of fiddling about getting the metal to fit in, but once it went in fine, it was okay. Whilst it was open, I treated the old hole inside, so there's an inside section with inaccessible metal where there was some very light rust, but rust nonetheless I couldn't get in and clean out. So I've coated that with rust encapsulator to really lock that in and hopefully protect it for a little while. And then welded this back on. This was quite tricky to weld. It was quite messy. When I welded it the first time, I'd grind it down and then would discover there were still holes in there. It was really unsatisfactory. It hadn't fitted in well. It hadn't. The metal was not solid up against each other. It hadn't got a good bind. So I welded it and ground it 3 times before I was sort of starting to get comfortable with the fact that it had got a decent connection. But once it was like that, I was going, okay, well, that's good, let's move on. So then I moved on to this end here, where I had to do a much more complicated fold of the metal, and I was really happy with that. So basically the folding of the metal was quite complicated. It took me quite a long time, but it was by bolting the metal between 2 bits of wood. So I'd have 2 bits of wood like this and the metal, and then with my hammer I'd knock it over on the wood, ding, 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 ding. And it got quite a decent complex fold, so it came up here, along there, up the back, and then over the front for the seal to go onto. Fitted beautifully. It was absolutely perfect. First time, couldn't believe it. I was really pleased. Got all the angles right, got all the distances right, and it sat really nicely, so that was great. When I welded it in, the top part welded really neatly, which I'm really pleased about. But down the bottom along here, it was a disaster. And basically ended up burning through the skin on the Kombi and left these big holes. So I had this beautifully folded piece of metal, welded well at the top, but at the bottom, disaster zone, burnt right the way through into the metal of the Kombi. So when I got all of that ground off and finished as well as I could, it was clear that I still had some more work to do. So on this one here, I basically cut out the damaged section and put in another plate down here, and then I also had to put a plate alongside this one here where I still had some quite big holes in the rust here in the metal, so I put another plate on there. There were still some holes left in the top section of the metal. They weren't really bad, but they're holes nonetheless, and I've had to eventually just try and fill those in as best I could without welding a plate on. So what I found was when I put this plate in, I had to cut that rusted section out, and it actually then dislodged the firm connection I had on this, which was a mild disaster. But anyway, so I welded all this back in, then had to re-weld all the way along here to get a much firmer connection. But once that had been done, I was really happy with it. It was solid. It was really well connected, it was coming out fairly smooth. I'd got most of the holes filled in with the weld and it was coming out really well. And over here, when I put this plate in, same story, but for this one I actually used a new welding technique that Spiguta put us onto. Thanks so much for your continued support, it's really helpful. And rather than trying to run the welder along in a line, just did spot welding all the way. Only spot weld, spot weld, spot weld, spot weld, and then gradually filled in the holes. That gave a much better finish. It suited the thin metal much better. I had no burn through, had much more control over where the weld was going. It came out much better actually. So just use spot welding along here. So that by the time I've done that, I've now got this to be really nice and solid and well sealed. When I had this hole open, I got back in and put the rust encapsulator in here, in that section, because I forgot to do it when I did the top bit. But after I did my second cut, I could get in and encapsulate it. And so I'm now left with a nice set of welding, a little bit messy, not perfect, definitely not professional. Some small holes along the top, but it's kind of, there it is, it's solid, it's done. I feel like I'm ready to move on. So what I did was I went then with the rust encapsulator and just painted over all of the weld joins and all of the remaining little holes that I've got left in here, just in an attempt to reduce the amount of access for water to actually directly touch the metal in the future. So I've rust encapsulated all of the weld joins. Then I've deoxidized the whole thing. I've then used a filler, and I've filled up all of the grinding, all of the weld joins. Some of the little holes along the top I've just filled with filler, which isn't great. It's not a great way of doing it, I don't think, but it's what I've done. And once I sanded off all of the filler, got it reasonably flat, I've then primed it and deoxidized and primed, and here we are. It's done. Nice and solid, not perfect. You can see underneath the prime, you can see a lot of these joins. I might even go back at some point and just try and tidy this up a bit, maybe sand it off again. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a job done, and I'm ready to move on.